In today's episode of Ultra Budget Builds, I'm going to show you guys how I turned this small form factor Lenovo M93P office machine into an ultra modern gaming PC that not only looks great, but performs great as well. And best of all, I did it for around 200 bucks. Ultra Budget Builds episode number 3, coming up next. Welcome back to Tech 215. I'm your host, Nick, and today is episode number 3 of Ultra Budget Builds. If you guys have not seen episode 1 and 2, I will leave a link in the description down below so you guys can get all caught up and not miss a thing. But for the rest of you guys, here is a quick recap of episodes number 1 and 2. Episode number 1, we totally rebuilt that donated machine from the ground up using the Pentium G4620, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and paired it with an RX 570. It had a total budget of $258. We flipped it a week later for 300 bucks. And then for episode number 2, with a $300 budget, we got the pawn shop build, which had an i7 2700K, 16 gigs of RAM, and once again, an RX 570 4 gigabyte model. We sold that in record time, took 2 days on Facebook Marketplace for $375, leaving us a total budget for this episode of $378. I also wanted to do something small form factor since a lot of you guys ask questions about small form factor Dells, HPs, Lenovos, and also I get a ton of questions about low profile graphics cards. So this episode has a ton of great information, and again, stay tuned till the end of the episode because I'm going to show you guys an alternate route you can take when getting a machine like this for so dirt cheap. So with all that out of the way, let's take a closer look at today's ultra budget build, the Lenovo M93P small form factor. So today's ultra budget build is the Lenovo M93P small form factor. If you guys have seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I picked 2 of these up for 50 bucks each from my buddy Bo, who does computer recycling. It came as pretty bare boned as it gets, no drives, no memory, just a motherboard, CPU, and power supply. But like every PC on the channel, we love to upgrade and add more powerful components to our build, and this was a perfect opportunity to finally mod out a small form factor Lenovo. So let's take a quick peek at the stock configuration of today's build. At the heart and soul of today's build is the Intel i5-4570, which even in 2020 is a decent CPU for gaming and workstation related tasks. It's part of Intel's 4th generation of CPUs codenamed Haswell. It's a 4-core CPU with a base clock speed of 3.2 GHz and a max turbo speed of 3.4. It has 6 megabytes of level 3 cache and also features PCI Express 3.0 and Intel's HD 4600 integrated graphics. The motherboard is a Micro ATX Intel Q87 Express chipset that accommodates all Haswell 4th generation Intel CPUs and the LGA 1150 socket. It supports up to 32 gigabytes of DDR3 1600 MHz memory and has 4 total DIMM sockets so we can run our memory in dual channel mode. The rear I/O features 2 USB 2.0 ports, great for keyboards and mice, and 4 USB 3.0 ports, gigabyte LAN, and also has 2 display ports, 1 VGA, your standard audio connectors, and most importantly for our purposes today, it has 2 PCI Express ports, one 3.0 by 16 and one PCI Express 2.0 by 16. Finally, our power supply is a small form factor 240 watt bronze rated PSU, which is more than adequate for our needs in today's build. So now let's take a look at the upgrades. With the remaining budget of 328 bucks, we had plenty of room for upgrades. So I traded the i5-4570 and paid 35 bucks to my buddy Dave in return for the i7-4770. The 22 nanometer Haswell CPU features 4 cores and 8 threads with a base clock speed of 3.4 gigahertz and a turbo frequency of 3.9 gigahertz. It has 8 megabytes of level 3 cache and an estimated TDP of 84 watts. With this upgrade, we're getting 4 additional threads, a bump in single core and multi-core performance, 2 extra megabytes of level 3 cache, which will certainly help out in gaming and especially in workstation related tasks like video editing and coding, and since it's an i7, it will certainly hold its value over the long haul. Next up was the most important part of any gaming PC, the graphics card. I found a really great deal on the GTX 1050 Ti low profile for 50 bucks and two 4GB sticks of DDR3, thanks to my good buddy Drew. The GTX 1050 Ti low profile was released in January of 2017, and at its heart is NVIDIA's GP107 die, founded on Samsung's 14nm architecture. The die measures in at 132mm squared. The 1050 Ti has a base clock speed of 1303 MHz and a boost clock speed of 1417 MHz, with memory speeds all the way up to 1752 MHz. The card also features 4GB of GDDR5 on a 128-bit bus, has 768 shading units or CUDA cores, 48 texture mapping units, and 32 ROPs. But best of all is that this card is low profile and does not require any additional power connectors from the PSU. Other than the GTX 1650 low profile card, this is the perfect card for small form factor Lenovo's, HP's, and of course, Dell Optiplexes. For our memory, we went with four 4GB sticks of DDR3 1600 MHz I picked up for 25 bucks. And for our storage, we went with the Kingston A400 240GB SSD off Amazon for 28 bucks, so we can load our OS and some of our favorite esports titles. And finally, our cooler. We once again had to go with something low profile, so I went with my favorite super budget low profile cooler, the Cooler Master i71C. It's perfect for builds like this, has a TDP rating of 84 watts, which is perfect for our quad-core i7, and in my opinion is one of the best looking, down-firing, low-profile coolers on the market at just 20 bucks. So here's a quick hardware recap. Roll that beautiful build montage. So let's look at some benchmarks, and first up, Cinebench R15, where we clocked a score of 733, and in OpenGL, we scored 103 FPS, off to a good start when compared to the 4620 and the i7 2700K from previous ultra budget build videos. We beat both of those chips even with the 2700K overclocked to 4.6 GHz, so off to a decent start, and it's clearly the best CPU we've ever had on the series. Only in heaven where the 1050 Ti shows its lack of power when compared to its full-sized AMD rival, the RX 570, clocking in a score of 70 FPS and a score of 1758. So out of the first two benchmarks, the one thing we can say is that the GPU is clearly the bottleneck. Again, guys, stick around to the end for a really good solution to this problem if you have a small form factor OEM system. Let's run some games, and first up is Fortnite, where at pro settings we got an average of 138 FPS, a 1% low of 67, and when the graphics are maxed, we still get a decent score of 49 FPS and a 1% low of 35. Next up is a newly released title from Final Strike Games, published by EA, Rocket Arena, where on the game recommended medium settings we saw an average FPS of 72, a max of 108, and a 1% low of 52. But now let's take a look at a AAA title, something to really test this machine's power. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. We ran the in-game benchmark, and at high settings, we only got an average of 31 FPS with a max of 66 and a 1% low of 20. Let's wrap this thing up. Alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Ultra Budget Builds, and let me give you a couple quick final thoughts on today's build as a whole. So as you can see, with some of the small form factor cards, they're just honestly not that good as their larger or regular size counterparts. Take for example the GTX 1050 Ti, which is now about 3-4 years old at this point. I got it for such a good price and it will perform great in esports titles, but when it comes to AAA titles, they just kind of perform around the console 30 FPS mark. Now you could go out and get the GTX 1650, which is a great card. It's 30 to 35% more faster, but it's also 170 bucks. And we did want to go out and get that card, but I got the 1050 Ti for such a good price, it was just too hard to turn down. I really wanted to keep the price of this ultra budget build at around 200 bucks, and it was more about showcasing what you can do with a little creativity, and if you get a small form factor build as cheap as I got this one. Now, the best option, and this is what I was referring to earlier in the video, is if you're able to get something like the Lenovo M93P or a small form factor Dell or HP, your best bet is to just take all the internals and put it into a regular case. And there are a couple things you do need to consider. So if it's small form factor, the first thing obviously you're gonna have to do is buy a normal size power supply, but the biggest thing you're gonna have to look out for is the 24 to 14 pin or 24 pin to 8 pin, which the Lenovo and the Dells have. But I will put a link in the description. They're about $7 on eBay. But doing it, you're gonna have so many more options. As you guys saw in today's video, the i7 4770 is still a really good chip for an ultra budget build like in today's video. However, the 1050 Ti really held it back. I really wish NVIDIA and AMD would pay more attention to this field. They don't put out too many small form factor cards, and I really wish that AMD would have released an RX 570 in low profile version, because the RX 570 competes with the 1060, and both of those cards just absolutely smoke the 1050 Ti. It's a good card for playing esports titles. It's okay for playing AAA titles, but the fact of the matter is they don't make a lot of low profile cards anymore. So your best bet is, again, just transferring everything to a bigger case, getting a new power supply, and getting the card you actually want. The 1650 Super and the RX 5500 XT are just such better cards than the 1650 and the 1050 Ti from NVIDIA. It's just the normal size cards offer so much more power, and they can really make a system that much better. But that's all the time we have for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. We just hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel, and I want to thank everybody out there for all your support over the last year. Please remember to like, subscribe, and if you guys have questions or comments, leave them down below. You guys know I answer and reply to every single comment. Thanks again for watching, guys. and I'll see you in about a week.